Λοιπόν, καλησπέρα σε όλους. Good evening to all of you. Dear Wafaa, welcome to Cyprus. We are very happy to host you here and share your experiences with us. Please allow me a short introduction in Greek and then we will move on with the panel in English. Θα ήθελα να σας καλωσορίσω στην εκδήλωση του τμήματος μας για την αρχιτεκτονική της Προσιτής Στέγης. Το τμήμα και το Πανεπιστήμιο δίνει μεγάλη σημασία σε θέματα που αφορούν την κοινωνία και το περιβάλλον και η προσιτή στέγη είναι ένα κέριο ζήτημα κοινωνικό, ένα πρόβλημα κοινωνικό που δεν είναι μόνο δικό μας, αλλά σε πολλές χώρες όπως θα δείτε πλέον είναι σοβαρό ζήτημα. Θα προσπαθήσουμε σε αυτό το πάνελ με τους πολύ σημαντικούς μας προσκεκλημένους να συζητήσουμε λίγο μια πτυχή του, τη πτυχή που άπτεται λίγο με τη δική μας δουλειά σαν αρχιτέκτονες, με την προσέγγιση του αρχιτέκτονα να σχεδιάζει χώρους και με το πόσο ο χώρος ανταποκρίνεται στις ανάγκες, στις ανέσεις, με μια δημιουργικότητα, με μια καινούργια ίσως προσέγγιση, με βάση τα δεδομένα στις ανάγκες του κόσμου. Ο κόσμος σήμερα περιμένει απαντήσεις. Σίγουρα δεν μπορούμε να δώσουμε απαντήσεις για τα θέματα του κόστους ή της χρηματοδότησης, αλλά μπορούμε να δώσουμε δημιουργικές λύσεις που να κάνουν τη ζωή των ανθρώπων ευκολότερη και τη στέγη προσιτότερη και πιο αποτελεσματική για τον κόσμο. Το τμήμα μας, όπως σας είπα, δίνει μεγάλη σημασία στα ζητήματα αυτά, ευθυγραμμίζονται με τους στόχους βιώσιμης ανάπτυξης του ΟΗΕ και ιδιαίτερα με το στόχο για τις βιώσιμες πόλεις και κοινότητες. Με αυτά τα σύντομα λόγια, σας ευχαριστώ που είστε εδώ, ελπίζω να απολαύσετε τη συζήτηση. Ευχαριστούμε τους ομιλητές μας, τη Wafaa, τον Άλκη, την Μαρία, την Έλενα, τον Ανδρέα και την Λόρα που συντονίζει. And I shall invite Wafaa to come to the floor and listen to her very interesting keynote speech.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Baron, for inviting me and Frederick University for inviting me for such a prestigious event for this roundtable, which is really challenging. And hopefully by the end of the presentation you would appreciate how complex the situation is in Egypt. I'm not trying to give any solutions or anything, I'm just maybe putting more questions on the table and hopefully these questions would bring things together for a solution hopefully soon. So before I start, I just wanted to do a very quick comparison. I couldn't compare Egypt to Cyprus, so I compared Cairo, the capital, to Cyprus. So Cairo is around a third of the area of Cyprus, 10 times the population, and very dense in some areas, and Egypt in general, the population growth is around 2%. Before I show you the presentation, because Laura, she said, what was before? There was a problem with housing for 70 years, and Laura told me what was before that. So I thought maybe I should show you what was before, then you can appreciate the problem that we have. So Egypt, apart from the ancient Egyptian architecture that you know, has very rich architecture in terms of Coptic, in terms of Islamic architecture. And during the 40s, the Khedive at that time wanted to have Cairo as the Paris of the Middle East. So he brought a lot of European architects, mainly from Paris, to design Cairo. So very rich architecture, very much to learn from Cairo. We have also modern architecture. This is the Alexandria Library. It was an international competition, and this is what we're heading for. This is the new capital that is being under construction now. So just to give you a spectrum of what's going on and where are we heading. So as an architect, and when I was preparing this presentation, I was thinking, okay, there are some terminologies that I think as architects we don't have a common understanding of it, and I was trying through this presentation to try to understand, and hopefully you can give us also your feedback on that. So what does technology mean? What is smart housing? What is affordable housing? And can affordable housing be smart? Or is it smart housing only for certain segments of the society? So let's see. Of course, housing is a very important aspect with regards to responding to the needs of the population. as an infrastructure. It's about the community and how the community sustains itself and how it's resilient to solve current and future problems. It is necessary as an infrastructure, as a social infrastructure, to develop inclusive urban areas. However, as any other infrastructure, is prone to underfunding and neglect in some areas. So housing as social infrastructure, it's not about just providing housing, so it's not a stock of housing that we need to provide. We need to be more pragmatic. We need to think about the community, because either the housing, which you're going to see in a bit, can sustain the community, or it can burden and suppress them. Smart building. What is smart building? It is associated with an intelligent building. But what does it mean, being smart? Is it being able to control the building, all the different aspects of it? Is it about using renewable energies? Is it about using sophisticated technologies? What is it? So I was trying to investigate, what is intelligent? What does it mean? So when we look into smart could be referring to people or a technology. And if we're talking about technology that is intelligent, it responds to users' needs. So a technology can be referring to a process or a product. So if we use the word building as a noun, so it refers to a product. If we use building as a process, then it also refers, or as a verb, it refers to a process. So a building is a technology that can be smart enough to respond and adapt to future needs. So having understood that, let's go back and try to understand the urban challenge that we're facing in Egypt. So I talked about Cairo. Now talking about Egypt, around more than 100 million in population, 1 million square kilometers in area. However, for 7,000 years, we have been living in the same area, which is around the Nile. And this is Cairo there. So you can imagine the rest of the country is desert. So it's very difficult to develop, and because of no water and energy, so it's off a grid. So this is a challenging thing to bring people outside. And this is what happens. You can find in some areas, very dense areas, no open areas for the people, no quality of life. And then it affects also the transportation. So we can summarize the urban problem in Egypt with regards to housing, work, because also we have an issue with work, and commuting. This is a very challenging journey every day that you have to commute in Cairo, and I suffer myself from that. And this would have physical and psychological impact on the people if we want a productive society. So how the problem in Egypt emerged? Definitely high population rate, increased migration from rural to urban, looking for job opportunities. And then in the 1960s, there were laws to secure the renting fees for the low-income people. And this has put the private sector off from investing in rental housing. And then came the war in the 60s, and this has led the people to take their decisions in their own hands, and they started to build their own housing. There is no official record of how much it represents from the total stock, but there are estimates that is around 60%. Egypt was trying to resolve these problems for years, and what they did, they just brought international initiatives and tried to apply these initiatives. However, these initiatives have been considered unsuccessful because you couldn't find one single project that you could say it resolved the problem. And one of these is the self-help or the incremental building. It was not only unsuccessful in Egypt, but also internationally, where, for example, in the UK, they considered it as aesthetic blight to the rural and suburban landscape. In Germany, they called it Wildsiedlungen, or wild settlement. It's unattractive and even called by some anarchists. However, there were successful projects for incremental building, but it was a package that came together. So there were incentives, there was capacity building, and there was close supervision. In a country like big as Egypt, it's definitely very difficult to maintain. That was an example in a mixed use where the government was trying to put the workshops that is, you know, jamming the traffic and the streets in Egypt, put them away. So they built a mixed-use housing for them, where they have their workshops on the ground floor, and the upper floors they have their residential units. However, the areas, as you can see, 60-70 meters, and the average number of family members are 4. So you can imagine it's very difficult, and culture also for Egyptians, a family and with 4 members cannot live in such an area. Apart from that, there were social, urban and design issues that the families found that this industrial nature for the neighborhood is not suitable for the females in the family. So they didn't like living there. So what they did, they either moved away, they rented their apartments for storage for the workshops, or they made a transformation to the units to increase the area sizes. In general, now those who live there are not necessarily those who work there. So the initiative was not successful. However, when we look at the context of the housing and what happens, that people start to transfer the housing into non-residential activities. So it seems like the mixed use fits well, but the thing is how to make it work properly. Especially that 60% of the population is below 30 years. We have an unemployment rate, while it dropped from 13% to 7%, and we need around 900,000 job opportunities. So the government cannot provide that, so we need other alternatives for this provision. So what do the people do when they don't get what they need? They build. So at certain time after the revolution, you could, wake up and you find a building built next to you, yeah? So it's illegally, and then comes the government and demolishes that. So it's a waste of time, money, and resources. Interestingly, that these informal areas are structurally stable. However, there are certain areas that are considered as unsafe. So they are built under a cliff of a bridge, or it's not using sound material. So it's slums, more or less. So what the government did, they relocated those people to the buildings that you see below, where they have finished, furnished apartments, and they rent to own. So they pay very nominal fee, and they provided them with services they wouldn't even dream of in their previous location. So what we need a solution where we bring the work and housing together, because this would help, hopefully, reducing the commuting and the traffic problem. But they need to have certain characteristics in terms of living and in terms of working in order to succeed. But what the government does, it continues building residential, so it's not mixed use. And then the people start to, change that illegally, and then goes the government and fights that back. So it's continuing like that. And you see here, these are numbers that have been built throughout the last 10 years. But there was no official record of how many do we actually need. So the government says we built 10,000 units, we built 100 units, yeah? Is this good, is it bad? We don't know. So just trying to do the math, yeah? So I looked into the marriage rate, this is the graph for it, and assuming that there is a certain segment of the society that can afford the housing, let's say 15%, again, there is no official record of the high-income people in Egypt. In the literature, you find people that talk that we need around 500,000 units annually to cover the needs of the people. We don't know where this figure comes from, but if I take this marriage rate at half of it, this gives us about the graph you see here below. What does the government build? It builds this. So the government had never met the needs that are needed, and that would mean that there are gaps that needs to be fulfilled. So there are gaps, and there are the natural increase, annual increase that needs to be fulfilled. So this complicates the situation. This was officially announced by the government, that they admitted that the housing that they provide are unaffordable for the low income. There are, because there are also inadequate assessment of the supply and demand. People tend to go for ownership rather than rentals. And because of that, the private sector are not willing to invest for low income because it's not worth it. And the housing strategy was issued by Egypt in 2020, and when we look at number 3 and 4, which are addressing low income and sustainability in housing, they use terminologies like relieved standard, yeah? financing and encouraging the private sector, but there are no implementation strategies that support this. So it's not clear how you're going to achieve, and they're very happy with this policy, but it's not clear how could you achieve that without an implementation strategy. Otherwise, we'll keep repeating the same mistake. Okay, so they said housing affordability is not affordable, but again, what does affordability mean? So it is understood commonly that it's a price to income ratio, and it was agreed that if it's at or below 30%, then it is affordable. However, this also has been criticized in literature because there is no theoretical background. We don't know where this 30% came from, and it's overlooking the dynamics, the changing dynamics of the needs. What happens in Egypt in terms of financing housing? So usually they ask for 10 to 15% for low income and middle income. They have installments up to 30 years and a decreasing interest rate per annum around 3%. Even that, this is not affordable for the low income and the middle income. And the price of the land is not, the government does not include it in this. There is a real estate tax that is around 2.5% of the real estate. However, units that have an annual rental worth of 24,000 Egyptian pounds, that's around 500 euros, they're exempted from this tax. And the question, what can architecture do to contribute to affordability? So breaking down the cost of a unit, so you have the land cost, you have the hard cost, and the soft cost. So as an architect, probably you don't have much to do with regards to the land cost. The soft cost as well, and the fees, etc., you cannot really do much about it. So this leaves us with a hard cost. And then the architect probably, this is where they can play, the material and the design and construction. So if we say the construction labor is around 50% of the hard cost, so how much does this leave for the material and the design and construction? 25%. Definitely the architect cannot eliminate the 25%, yeah? So how much can it help reduce from the total? Is it 5%, 10%? Would it then be considered affordable? So probably we need to have some sort of understanding what is affordability and how can it be achieved with the contribution of an architect. And when I was working in the industry with a contractor, so I was not practicing architecture. And then I moved to the UK, so I did my master's and PhD, and when I came back, I found that informal housing and informal sector, this is really the trend, yeah? And the international scholars, they are romanticizing the informal sector, yeah? They are criticizing the government when they try to do something. No, this is what the people do, let them do what they're doing. And I say, well, guys, I mean, this is not, you're not living there. You're not affected by the living situation. So this made me a little bit uncomfortable, and I wanted to understand more. So I went to research more into the informal housing and tried to draw some connections and synergies between different initiatives. So again, what is informal housing? Informal housing is the informal adaptation of the government-provided housing or the formal housing. It could be complete buildings, not only adaptation, because the government cannot, fulfill the needs of the people. And the greater the mismatch that the government provides, the greater the urge to change the housing of the people, the more complex it's going to be to address that and control them. And this is an example, yeah, Hassan Fathi. This project here, it's worldwide known, and had a lot of prizes, etc. So when we look at it environmentally, definitely it's viable because it's using local material. Economically, is it really viable? I'm asking myself the question. Maybe the initial cost, but maintaining such buildings, probably it's going to be very expensive. Socially, it was not successful as well. I mean, the international community are happy with it, but the locals are not happy. Why? Because culturally, this typology of architecture is related to the Nubians. Yeah, the local community there, they resonate this typology of architecture to shrines. So for them, this is a building for the dead. So they couldn't live in there. So the culture is not fitting this typology there. In addition, it was labeled by the news and the international community by the architecture for the poor. So why would anyone want to be labeled as a poor? So if you're going to live there, you're going to be a poor person. So people don't want that. So what did they do? They did this informal housing, concrete and brick construction. These are other projects on the Red Sea, again, USAID, they funded these projects, again, not fulfilling, and people started to adapt it illegally. So what does informality do? It allows you flexible horizontal extension, it allows you flexible vertical extension, it allows you having flexibility using hybrid structures, so you see here load-bearing and skeletal construction. Services are flexible, you can do wherever you want the wet areas and you just put the plumbing there. Personalization, so they're thinking about coloring their individual facades and the windows and the openings, so that you have full, flexibility in whatever you want. And looking into this, I found that there are synergies between the concept of open building, so they depart from these predetermined models, and they break down the building into distinctive layers that each layer can be dealt with individually, and this also allows the mass housing and the speed of construction. And if we're looking at the situation in Egypt, definitely we need the speed of construction. So these different layers, it's the structure or the support, this is pretty much fixed. However, the infill, the different layers are totally separated from each other, and you have the flexibility to change and do whatever you want. So this helps with the retrofitting if you want to do retrofitting, free competition, and allowing reuse and recycling if you want. And looking at some of the international initiatives, this project here, the Metastadt, it used the high-tech, the latest technology at that time. However, it had to be demolished after it was built because the technology was obsolete, and the government found that it's going to be too expensive to maintain it, so it's cheaper to demolish it, and this is what they have done. This is a more successful project, in my opinion, because it's still existing in Japan, where the structure was pretty much fixed, and there were 13 different architects designing the individual units. So, I mean, theoretically, you can change the facades literally every day if you want. Yeah. Again, this is another project that allows the vertical flexibility and the horizontal flexibility, again, in Germany. So, going back to the smart building. So, when we talk about smart building and fulfilling the needs of the people, so probably we're talking about two different or two related terminologies, flexibility and adaptability. So flexibility in use, this refers mainly to the passive flexibility, where the space itself allows you to have different functions in it, or the active flexibility, which allows you to physically change the space. By doing that, probably we need to look into a spectrum that moves from standardization to pure customization, bearing in mind that increasing customization would increase the cost and increase the lead time. So, as a conclusion, smart housing, it's not about sophisticated technology. It needs to be sustainable, should not stigmatize people, should not be labeled architecture for the poor, should respond to people's basic need, should promote the sense of community, and should be performance-based. And should be affordable for everyone, so not for a certain segment of the society. And what is the role of the architect? Definitely, it's very important. However, an architect cannot work alone, cannot achieve much alone. Professionals need to work and should collaborate together, and they should not be working in silos. It is a teamwork. So, in order to achieve adaptability and smartness, probably we need to redefine affordability. What does it mean? We need to define the architecture contribution. How much can architecture contribute to affordability? Because if there is no common understanding, then everyone would have different interpretation, and we end up where we are. And probably we need a system that has inherent control, rules within the system to allow this, self-control rather than someone going after the people to control it. We need economies of scale to achieve affordability. We need competition, and we need an industry-wide process model and a business model for design, construction, assembly, maintenance, and recycling. So it's not just about the first stage of the building, it's the whole process. And probably we also need to revisit the architecture education. So let's try to be a little bit more positive and not call it affordable housing, rather smart housing. Thank you very much.
What we decided to do, we decided to invite the panel in order to ask them for their short position statement, if you want to, and start the conversation, and we'll take the questions afterwards. So if you have any questions for Wafaa, I would suggest you keep them for a little bit later. Wafaa, extraordinary pictures, of course. I mean, we've seen extraordinary scales. We're not familiar with it. But every single point you raise, I could find immediately the parallel in the kind of Cyprus situation. You talk about cultural consideration of affordability, of people being ashamed, not being able to afford anything. Conflict between policy and need. Policy doesn't understand need. Empty policies, policies that they don't contain anything. Financing, it's international. I mean, the figures you showed is exactly what we need to do in Cyprus, borrow. The way we borrow money is exactly the same. I loved your cost analysis. It never occurred to me that as architects we can impact on such a short, very, very short aspect of what it is. What it told me is that we need to get out and become politicians. I think your opportunity is coming up now with the election. I'm not sure, I think we've lost this one. We'll go for the next one. We need to get into politics in order to be able to do something. Social connotations of architecture, and I love the informal sector. Even the informal sector, I mean, we saw these very tall buildings. Now, 25% of buildings in Cyprus housing is informal architecture. People built without permissions. So I could see the parallels immediately. Can I ask the panel to come at the podium in order to start the conversation? I will ask you all in order to begin with your statements on the basis of what we've seen from this presentation. I don't think I need to introduce them. You have done it anyway. So where do you want to start? Shall we start from the left? From the right to left. Okay, Άλκη. So, your thoughts on the topic.
Here we go. Okay. So, Wafaa, congratulations on your presentation. I would want to also say thank you on behalf of the Cyprus Architects Association for this event, Virona, Laura, and all of the academic staff. Thank you very much for today's event. Very interesting. A very, I don't know, shall we be speaking in English or in Greek?
I think we decided we'll be speaking in English in order, we had a conversation this week and we decided we want to include Wafaa into the conversation. You do not have to raise the questions in English. Greek is absolutely fine. I will be translating. If there is a problem with any terms, I will help with translations. It will take a little bit longer, but I think it's worth doing it.
Okay.
Are you okay? Everybody in English?
Yeah.
Do I need to slow down a little bit? I think not. Definitely. Okay, I can see a lot of heads moving, so we are fine. Great.
So the issue of affordable housing or social housing or smart housing is a very hot topic, I believe. In Cyprus at the moment we have a very large number of unused housing units, more than 30,000 unused housing units, and we have a housing crisis. So we need to find solutions in collaborations with the planning department, with the government authorities, of how to resolve this issue. And as we can see, there are areas in Cyprus, such as Nicosia, where the rents are not so high, but in comparing to Limassol, the rents are very high, so the residents are forced to move away from the city. So, in terms of what Wafaa has presented, which I think raises a very important topic, and the topic is smart housing. Let's call it smart housing. I really like this definition because I think it's not only social housing, it's not only affordable housing. It has to do with housing that adjusts and adapts to the needs of the community. So if you look at Cyprus and what we've been through in terms of that, with the in 1974 exchange of population as a result of the Turkish invasion. There's been a housing crisis once again during that period. So when there was the exchange of population, immediately the government needed to find ways, funds, to house, I can't remember the numbers, but the numbers of housing units.
250,000.
Exactly. So what the motto of the government was at that time was temporary comfort, because everybody at that time believed that the people would be able at some point to go back to their original houses. What has happened, funds came in from abroad, and the government created GAEC, Cyprus Architects and Engineers Company, in 1974. They designed housing, social housing, or let's say refugee housing, which was very basic, 90 square meters, 100 square meters, if I'm not mistaken. So all the people that left their houses because of the invasion, which were much bigger, they needed now to move into smaller housing units. And what this caused to the period of time is the people started to adjust these houses. If you look at pictures of when these refugee houses were developed, they were very basic. They had concrete blocks with a basic structure, a slanted roof, and that was it. A very simple structure, very cheap, and everybody was managed to get housed. But during the period of time up to now, if you look at previous pictures of how these housing units were and how they are now, they are completely different. They have their own pergolas, they have adjusted to have more parking areas, gardens, vegetable gardens, even the communal spaces next to the houses, they were adopted, let's say, by the units in order to be able to house their needs. So if you put people that were used to living in houses that were 150 square meters into a 90 square meter house, they need to expand. And this was a beautiful thing. And you see that there is a need for this flexibility and adaptability. And then the question comes in, what is the role of architects in order to provide this? How do we as architects provide this to communities, and we do not offer something that is a bottom-down approach, design approach? It's not a bottom-up approach, it's not a top-down approach, but it's something in between. And there are very interesting projects. Of course, one of them is by Alejandro Aravena, who created this social housing or affordable housing. I think it's social housing, which designed half of the housing unit, but the other half left it open so that it can be adjusted to the needs of the residents. And so I think we as architects need to step back and say, okay, we're not gods, we do not know everything. We need to provide, of course, housing units that are smart, as Wafaa says, but we also need to allow space for people to be able to expand, adjust, and be able to feel comfortable with their needs. Whether this open space is a garden, whether it is an extra room, 2 extra rooms, whether it's a bigger kitchen, a bigger living room, etc. So we need to find solutions not only in terms of us as designers, but in terms of policymakers, of how this can happen. We cannot be so strict in terms of social housing or affordable housing. We need to be much more flexible. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation. I wasn't prepared for a statement. I thought it was...
I'm sure you have a position, though. Nothing can stop you doing that.
I have a position because we went through what is the meaning of social housing, what is the meaning of affordable housing, and Wafaa answered that we should not address the problem as social housing or housing for the poor.
Yeah.
Or affordable housing. It's a smart housing. Yes, I agree with Άλκης, and also the need to have housing that are flexible. They can be transformed from either 1-bedroom apartment, 2-bedroom apartment, or a 3-bedroom apartment. But we are here in the reality of Cyprus with a specific rule. Unfortunately, we can't submit a permit without stating this is 1 bedroom and this is an open apartment and so on. Regardless that, while we discussed on the other day, it's good to go through the economic crisis and what this brought to Cyprus and even to Europe. And the need in Cyprus for the youngsters to have affordable housing. You have the war in Ukraine, you have the war now in Israel, in Palestine, and how this affects how does this transfer to the prices of the land, the prices of the materials, this is something you addressed about the materials, and how this led to the high prices of the apartments. What do we do about this? Because we as architects, we may design, we may dream, we may think that okay, we can provide people empty shells and let them complete it, like Aravena did in Chile, that he provided the shells and let the people finish it or build it, but how they are going to pay?
Even the shells, you mean?
Even the shells.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we see that now we don't have the category the poor, or the middle class, or the upper class, whatever they are.
I think we are all poor. We can agree to that.
I think for now, poor and middle class are in the same line. So the need, as I was reading an article regarding the European Union and what they do about that, it's a governmental need. And this is a step forward, and I will let Andrea proceed because he's very familiar about the initiatives that the government gave to developers to create more houses, affordable houses,
yes,
with the incentives of building more square meters. I believe we are in a good direction. It's still in the middle. It's it's a very good step, and we will see how this follows. We need it.
Okay.
Young people can make loan, can buy an apartment. They minimize their needs. They don't need big houses. Something since many years we are working now in Cyprus. We went from individual houses of 300 square meters, 400 square meters. Now we're seeing the cost of electricity, the running costs of heating and blah, 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 and all the running expenses. So we should address the needs of youth, of the 30-something
people who are starting now their careers.
They're starting now, and they cannot buy even a 2-bedroom apartment or a 3-bedroom apartment.
Yes, and the problem, Maria, with that, this is not a crisis. It's not something which is temporal. It's not going to go away.
No,
in other words, there are crises that they start and then they subside. But I get the impression this is to stay. In other words, salaries are not going up, and then everything else does in parallel. So it's a permanent, it's a new state of affairs, I think.
In more realistic, pragmatic, yes, they are more pragmatic because they know I have a 2-bedroom apartment, I'm okay. And the criteria about having a low-cost housing, that okay, if you are one person and you are allowed this kind of housing, if you are two, you are allowing more, or the loan, or these things needs fixing.
No, it's not a bad thing. The only thing you expect, though, is them, the younger people, to have other dreams. If our dream was to make a house or to have a big house and live,
60,
their dream, it should be somewhere else. It shouldn't be in terms of owning a large house and so on.
So our architect, it means as architects, sorry, is to provide something that, yes, may be small in our standards, but it can be transformed and be
a home for them.
Yes.
Yeah. Great, thank you very much. Andrea.
So I think I will begin with some more recent events and reflections. 2 years ago, you could build a house up to 200 square meters, paying 5% VAT. Now it's not the case because the European Union figured out we were misusing this reduced VAT ability that was meant to be applied for social good. Let's say not social housing, but for social good. And they realized that in Cyprus you could buy a 200 square meter apartment in a tower in Limassol, a few millions, and pay 5% VAT, and that is not okay. So basically what this kickstarted is a procedure where, as a country, we needed to really think about what is social benefit and who should benefit from this incentive. Which led us to study a little bit more into what are we doing in terms of housing sizes and costs, and where should we draw the line and say, look, this couple that are building this type of house, they're entitled to this reduced VAT, in contrast to this other couple who have exceeded this limit, this line, and their house is not considered like a social good or an affordable unit anymore. So looking at all of this data from the past years of planning licenses and the statistical service that has data on what was built, through a lot of discussions, we ended up, the parliament ended up deciding that 130 square meters is like the milestone where it changes from being affordable or a social incentive to something else. This also led us to critically reflect with the public on what do you actually need for a house. And people soon realized that it's not only the difference between the 19 or the 5% VAT that makes it unaffordable, but also just the size of it and the increased construction cost because of the various reasons meant that an average couple couldn't own a house in a way that they could before. Suddenly, couple realized that they don't need a formal living room and an informal living room, or a formal dining table and an informal one near the kitchen, which was the normal practice. And they realized, look, we can just use the table we have and eat there every day, or we can have one living room, but maybe a little bit bigger, and this is suitable for our needs. And suddenly, we found ourselves designing houses within this 130 square meter limit that are actually quite efficient and quite effective in facilitating daily life, and you get more gardens and bigger verandas, which are also quite good. So I think I quite like that diagram with the split between the different costs, the soft and the hard cost, and I think once you also consider the life cycle of a house, financing costs, for example, you pay at the moment with the taxation, what you pay in interest is about as much as the loan you get. So if you get a 150,000 euros loan, you will pay 300,000 by the time your loan is finished. So if you consider all of this, actually it's much less that we can affect. But we can also affect more because what if the overall construction cost of the house is less because it's smaller and because it's more efficient? Then you need a smaller loan, which means less interest and less cost to maintain. So I think in some ways, yes, it's that small percentage, but in other ways, what we do with that percentage has impacts in all of the other categories. So I think even though initially I thought, I started quite pessimistic, I thought also that maybe we need to be more politicians and what can design do about this? But I think at the end I'm quite optimistic that if we are smart with the way we design and efficient and find ways to be adaptable and expand the house according to the house needs, and then also reduce the house according to the needs when the children go to study or emptiness syndrome.
Absolutely.
I think being,
an empty house.
yes, I know, and being clever about how you design, I think will have a huge impact on what is a smart or affordable house.
Lovely, thank you very much. Elena?
Thank you for the invitation. Wafaa, was very interesting, your presentation. I will not stay so to the land cost, hard cost and soft cost. And I will say something about what we can do as architects. Because the other things that, let's say, maybe will be state incentives. How can we create affordable housing in terms of numbers? But what we can do as architects, first of all, is the functionality and the flexibility of the design, that we can create imaginative units that can adapt to the needs of the family. It's not necessary to be so big. We can scale down the internal spaces and create areas in continuity with the outdoor space. This is very important because the outdoor space, verandas, gardens, will give us the opportunity to maximize the area of the house without increasing the cost, because this is not count at the same number to the construction cost. Something else that I would like to mention is about what we can do from our designs. It's not necessary to make big spans, huge spans and cantilevers and this. So in that way, with our design methods, we can reduce the construction cost. On the other hand, we have to see how this can be affordable house for everyone, because everyone deserves good design, I think.
But it doesn't have to be complicated, is that
Yes.
what you're saying?
It
Yeah.
is, it is.
It has to be wise. Lovely, thank you very, very much. I've filled in my 1A4 piece of paper, but instead of launching into what I made a note of, I would like to ask for, can we get some questions, suggestions, reflections, anything that has to do with the topic? Counting hands. Eva is one, anybody else? Panagiotis said 2, 3. Okay, at the moment, shall we start with these 3? What I will do, I'll take all 3 questions, and I will kind of make a note of the topics and then ask the panel to respond to it, if you don't mind. Great.
Well, thank you very much, Wafaa. It was very interesting. I have made so many notes. I'm not going to elaborate, so don't worry. I'm just mentioning, because everything you said gave me an idea. I would like to say to the people that I'm not an architect myself. I'm a civil engineer and an urban planner, and my expertise is on identity and development of cities. So I would like to put some new perspectives broader on the topic. First of all, if here we discuss today how architects can affect the cost, then we're silently accepting the failure of the policies. Because the role of the policies is to afford to provide the communities with affordable housing. Housing is considered to be a right by the United Nations. So we silently all accept here that this is not the case anymore, and that the states cannot provide the communities with affordable housing. So if only the architects could solve this problem. Because I understand the social role of architecture, which is very important. But here, let me give an example from my country, Greece. The cost of the houses raises even for the old buildings. So it's not anymore about what is the hard cost or whatever. For the old buildings, we would expect the cost for buying an old apartment to be lower because of the time that has passed, but it's not the case anymore. Real estate is so much more complex than that. So I think also there is a very important social role for renovations. How architects are going to address the issue, because so many new families and couples can't even dream now to buy a new house, but they have probably access to an old house by their grandparents, for example, and they want to affordably restructure it to something that is not παλιό, παροχημένο. It's not old, but it's not outdated. Thank you very much.
Outdated, yeah.
So I think this is also a very important role. It's not only limited to new constructions, but also to renovations, because this is a trend in my country nowadays. Everyone is trying to renovate buildings. So another issue has to do with, I'm coming from the University of Thessaly. I don't know how many of you are aware of the natural disasters and the floods, but it's not only about the socio-economic conditions and the economy that's not so nice, it's also about the climate change. Because we're expecting many people in the next decades probably to lose their houses. Even the lucky ones who were able to get a house, we don't know if they will be suffering from a disaster or not. And we have to be ready with new materials and new practices and new technologies for affordable and easy to make new houses for people. Because in Thessaly there was an earthquake 2 years ago. Some people don't have a house 2 years later because the state was not prepared for this kind of disasters. And the floods were in October, and still some people do not have houses. So homeless people who were not homeless before the disasters. And the third thing that I would like to add to the discussion is that this, I loved your, this about the smart and the affordable, because the sustainability concept contains a huge contradiction here. Because it's not always easy for the environmental aspect to go hand by hand with the economic or the social one. And this orientation of European policies towards smart technologies, smart cities, smart tourism, smart housing, smart whatever, creates new exclusions for a lot of people. And we need to address that. And I also have a question that I'm going to close here. What is the opposite of smart? I mean, we say smart communities, okay, and smart houses. And what is the opposite exactly? So I don't like this term, okay? I'm against the term smart. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Shall we take at the back the next question and then another one here, and then start the conversation?
Hello, my name is Lambis Stylianidis. I'm a UK-trained chartered civil instruction engineer. And I would just like to stress a few points about Cyprus. I think that we should, architects and engineers should look more into industrial methods of reducing the cost of housing, like panels for walls, internal and external walls. I have one example. I was involved in the building, not the opposite, the next one, which was built about 10 years ago. It's students' flats. And we used there imported walls. They were concrete with polystyrene inside, made and imported from China, which reduced the cost much instead of the standard bricks we used in Cyprus and plaster on top, because they were like fair face. We saved a lot of money on the plastering inside and outside. But you have to solve some problems with expansion joints and construction joints and things like that. But what I'm saying, if you can produce many of these parts of the building in a factory, then your cost will come down, in which architects and engineers should look very deep into this. I know in other countries they do it without reducing the quality. The quality of the materials and the construction must be high. The second point I would like to raise from my experience in Cyprus is the strict town planning laws that we have. For example, we are talking about the renovation of existing buildings. I was involved in a project where it was a 30-year-old existing building with flats. And the owner wanted to, at that time, verandas were made very small because of the regulations. Now they changed the regulations and they allow you to make big verandas, and they don't count in the square meters and things like that. But for the old buildings, it's not easy to extend your balconies, to make it better for the owner. So what I'm saying is that the town planning departments and the regulations should be more friendly to the smart design that we are talking. Not say, these are the rules, we don't change it. And as the panel mentioned, the sizes are too big. For a single one-bedroom flat, you need 50-55 square meters minimum. If it's 3 meters less, they will not allow you to. For a garsoniera studio, 35 square meters. Why? In England, in Tokyo, they don't have 35 square meters of flats. Why we insist on that? They should be more flexible. The attempts like giving to the contractors, developers extra motives are good, but I have doubts if it's going to work at the end of the day. They should give more motives to the private sector and the individuals, owners in this area, who could build small flats for students. I know one thing that I had experienced, they still use it a lot in England and in the cities especially, these HMOs. That is, it's an existing house, it is 3-bedroom, an existing house with a garden, and they make it 5-bedroom, each with its private bathroom, and they rent it to 5 individuals, usually young people, working in the city or in the center of the city, which makes it very affordable. They have a common kitchen and a common living room, which solves in a good way the problem of funding residents, because young people in all countries can, because of their low income, they cannot rent, especially if they want to be near the city center for their job.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Panagiotis and Moni here at the front.
Thank you very much, and congratulations for your presentation. I'm a chartered architect. I worked in the UK for 25 years, specializing in affordable housing. Since my return to Cyprus, my aim is to implement some policies which are common to the people of Cyprus, because we're dealing with culture, a different culture, we have to respect that, in providing affordable housing. Recently, I've been appointed as well in the board of directors for the Housing Corporation Cyprus. My aim there is to try to bring more policies. The basics, the way I see the problem in Cyprus, is that housing policies are driven by planning authority and not driven by the municipalities. The municipalities have a role here to engage and commit themselves in providing a number of affordable housing in their cities. And the planning department should follow those implementations. For example, in Cyprus we have policies since 2011, still in place and never been changed. So the priority, when I was in London, I was part of the team giving support to the mayor of London, how developers, because I was my role as design manager in a big development company, how the role of developers can enhance and provide enough affordable housing. So the mayor was driven the policies, and was pushing the planning authorities to implement that. Here in Cyprus, we do exactly the opposite, and this is wrong. Coming back to the various incentives recently implemented by Cyprus, I was part of the, together with Vironos, in May 2019, when we developed the first directive for affordable housing. It was a big failure, simply because by giving extra density to specific plots of land, thinking that the developer will benefit from the additional density, that's not the case. Because the landowner already knows that it will go in and it puts the prices up. So it's not a gift, it doesn't work. And I'm in doubt about the current directive, the number 2 of 2023, whether it will work or so. So in concluding, my urging is for the mayor, and now we have the changes in Cyprus, to push that. And you mentioned about we architects should become politicians. I'm doing that by urging the current candidates that plots of land owned by the government, plots of land owned by municipalities, plots of land which are a result of plot dividing and everything given to the community, those plots should be given to by license to be built, so that we have affordable housing, or I like the idea of smart housing. Always it made reference to affordable housing. I was initiated the word Προσιτή in Cyprus because I said to them, they used to use the word Κεντρική. Κεντρική is social housing, whereas affordable housing is Προσιτή, and it hasn't got the stigma which it carries on with that. So yeah, my belief is that planning policies will not and will never bring affordable housing, but the town halls, the mayors, and those responsible for their cities should be responsible in committing themselves to bring a number of affordable housing in their region. Thank you very much.
Let me try to sort of organize the conversation around. I did another one. Ella Session.
Hello, I'm Anastasia. I'm a third-year architecture student in Frederick University, and I have maybe 2 questions. One of them is for Ms. Wafaa, because I think that you are probably the best person to answer this. Now, about the situation in Cairo, would you say that the people living there are making all these adaptations because they have maybe too much stuff or a lot of life to fill their house with? Because maybe I saw some pictures that people started these adaptations in order to make them livable for themselves. So maybe they have too much stuff with them, both in their mind and materialistic. And the other question is for Mr. Άλκης. I think that you mentioned about the 1974 invention. Afterwards there was a housing, I don't remember the name, sorry. No, there was a housing problem.
Problem, yes,
yeah.
and program.
Yeah, and about how people went from too many square meters living into much less. Would that be fixed if the morals of the people living there would be about living minimal and be okay with less stuff than they already have? Would that be fixed for not only Cyprus or around here, for the whole world? Like being okay with having less stuff and not like 20 different seats about linen and 20 different towels that you would inherit them from your mother?
Excellent question. Yes. I'm terribly sorry, but I will start from my students' questions, definitely. So can we start from the bottom up? I have everything, I've got all my notes, so I will come back to the other topics as well. So Wafaa, what does drive people in Cairo to take on the issue in their own hands and actually get onto it and get organized around organizing and making their own home? What are the drivers for that?
Well, I do like the question very much, yeah, where to start? I mean, it could be some of the reasons. I mean, culture is one of the reasons, because with a family, girls and boys, they have to have their own, you know, private areas. So probably the areas like a 2-bedroom apartment, definitely this is not going to help, yeah? And even verandas and balconies, if you go, I mean, I love it when I see it around, yeah? But if you go to Cairo, you'll find people who have balconies, they close it, so they have an extra room. So this is also a problem. Another problem could be because if a family have enough space, let's say, and they have a kid who's going to get married, this kid cannot afford, so probably maybe they need to extend the room so they can have it. So there is no one single answer why they do that, but you're totally right as well, because they also have a lot of stuff. Because there is the peer pressure and the cultural, you know, social prestige and whatever, which is a very, very problematic issue in our culture, that when they see my relative has this, my daughter should have this as well, and they end up having a lot of things, you know, stuffed in. So this is also a culture that we need to change, but you're totally right. Yeah, I hope
there's also commodity has a value there. I think our attitude here in buying things and throwing them away because we know we can buy them again when we need them. I get the impression, I know a little bit about Middle Eastern culture, for example, you never know. Keeping stuff is about reusing them at some point in time because simply you cannot afford buying a new one when you actually need it. Okay, thank you very much. Άλκη, will you touch a little bit? Are refugees unhappy in their small homes? Is
yeah,
the question
if I can
assume.
answer Anastasia's question, because she asked a direct question to me. You couldn't have asked this question at a better time to me than now, because I moved from an apartment that I was in to another apartment last weekend. And I realized that 1/4 of the stuff that we had in the apartment we threw out. We didn't need it. So I agree with you. I think it's a cultural issue. We need to change the way we think, that we do not need half of the shoes that we have stored. We do not need a lot of stuff that we have in the house. Of course, I moved to a smaller apartment now than I was before, and I had to make adjustments. But of course, the adjustments are there. It's livable now. The apartment is fine. But I think we need to change this culture. I think, of course, everybody has different needs. So, of course, in the market there needs to be a range of spaces that need to be given. But we have the ability as human beings to adjust and to adapt, and that's why the flexibility is important. I don't know if would you like us to?
I think Maria is dying to.
We need people. We don't need stuff.
We need people.
Very important.
Okay. Lovely. Yes, of course.
I think when we talk about the finishing of the house from the village rural houses, we have to remember it's also a question of lifestyle, because those people were farmers. They were farmers in the plain, which means that they were cultivating wheat and barley, etc. So they needed much larger areas. They had their animals, they had different things. So tragically, yes, of course I agree with the drift that maybe we shouldn't have too many things or not, and that's also a personal question. It depends on who you are and what you want to have. But let's not forget the needs of the actual people, their occupation, their lifestyle, what they need, etc. So this was a transition, I think, more out of necessity, because it wasn't possible to have those large rural houses with the donkey in one area and a stable or something like that. So
probably their living space, Ferdinand, would have been the same.
Even
I get the
smaller,
impression even smaller, their living spaces from where they came or from a farmhouse.
Because they probably kept a lot of their produce inside their living areas.
Okay.
And used only part of it. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Να μιλήσω ελληνικά, sorry, Wafaa.
Ναι,
He will translate. Αν πάρουμε την παραδοσιακή κυπριακή κατοικία της παιδιάδας στο χωριό, ήταν ένα μακρινάρι. Και εμένα με τα ζώα, συμφωνώ με αυτό τον που είπες. Αλλά πάρουμε και ιστορικά την Κύπρο και τι έζησε μέσα στους αιώνες, τους πολέμους, τους ταραχτητές κλπ. Ναι, τα πράγματα μας, τα δικά μας, ήταν τα μόνα που μετακινούνταν μαζί με τους ανθρώπους. Απλά είμαστε σε μια νέα τάξη, μια νέα εποχή που αλλάζει δραματικά και αλλάζει με την ημέρα. Δηλαδή, δεν ξέραμε ότι θα έρθει το COVID, κανένας δεν ήξερε, μόνο οι Αμερικανοί με τις ταινίες. Και ξαφνικά τι συνέβηκε, άλλαξε τελείως η καθημερινότητα μας και τούτον επηρεάζει. Επηρεάζει πάρα πολλά και τον κόσμο στο πώς ζει και πώς εργάζεται, πώς κινείται. Αλλάξαν τα πάντα και ξαφνικά από τους δύο πολέμους, τούτον το πράγμα είναι οι κοινωνικές επιπτώσεις και στην αρχιτεκτονική και στην καθημερινότητα και στις ανάγκες μας. Και εκείνο που ήθελα να πω πριν, ότι οι νέοι, με τούτα που ζήσετε, αλλάξετε πάρα πολλά την κουλτούρα που είχαμε εμείς η γενιά του πολέμου, που ήταν να κουβαλήσουμε όλα μας τα πράγματα και τα ευθύνια, δεν ξέρω εγώ, να πρέπει να αφήνουμε πίσω μας και να είμαστε καθαροί. Και έχω και μετά κάποια ερώτηση για τον Παπομίου.
Ναι. Οκ, να την παραλάβουμε μαζί με τις άλλες. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Να ξεκινήσω από την αρχή, από τα σημεία τα οποία τοποθετήθηκε η Εύα. Άρεσε μου η ιδέα το ότι... Συγγνώμη. Αν θέλετε να σχολιάσετε για το ίδιο θέμα. Ναι. Για τον...
Ναι.
Κάτι σε αυτό που είπε η Εύα, σε ό,τι αφορά την επανάχρηση των παλιών κτηρίων, θεωρώ ότι τούτο θα ήταν ένα σημαντικό βήμα και από το κράτος, δηλαδή να υπάρξουν κίνητρα για να εκμεταλλευτούμε τα παλιά κτίρια, ειδικά εδώ στη Λευκωσία, που η παλιά πόλη έχει ερημώσει, να δοθούν κίνητρα από το κράτος για να δημιουργηθεί προσιτή κατοικία, αλλά κίνητρα όχι αποστηρωμένα ή αποξενωμένα από οτιδήποτε, προσαρμοσμένα στις ανάγκες του κάθε κτηρίου, στις δυνατότητες, και με αυτόν τον τρόπο θα έχουμε προσιτή κατοικία μέσα σε έναν ήδη υφιστάμενο κέλυφος. Το ένα σχόλιο που ήθελα να κάνω είναι αυτό. Να συνεχίσω για να...
Ναι, βεβαίως.
Και το άλλο, αναφορικά με το απευθύνομαι σε εσάς, θεωρώ ότι είναι ένα πολύ σημαντικό κίνητρο τώρα που δίνεται μέσα από την εμπλοκή των ιδιωτών developers να δώσουν προσιτή κατοικία, γιατί με αυτόν τον τρόπο έχουμε έναν υγιή ανταγωνισμό αφενός, αλλά γι' αυτό θα πρέπει να γίνεται και έναν πολύ καλό monitoring, δηλαδή να μην ξεφεύγει όλο αυτό. Και με αυτόν τον τρόπο επίσης από κοινωνιολογική πλευρά, αν το δούμε, δεν έχουμε τις ξεχωριστές οικιστικές μονάδες που είναι για τους φτωχούς ή για τους με τα χαμηλά εισοδήματα ή τώρα για την προσιτή στέγη, αλλά η προσιτή στέγη γίνεται ένα μαζί με έναν σύγχρονο, καινούριο οικιστικό συγκρότημα. Οπότε από κοινωνιολογικής πλευράς θεωρώ ότι τούτο είναι προς τη σωστή κατεύθυνση.
Θυμήθηκα Λόρα.
Πες, έλα.
I will switch to English to help Άλκη.
Yes.
We are making a big assumption here from the beginning, and the assumption is that house ownership is the goal, right? So rental also, like once you realize that the goal is not to own, but you can also rent, adaptability is much more easier because you can just switch houses or apartments.
According to your needs, yes.
Yes, and like Άλκης, he's the example.
Exactly. We'll ask him later what the incentive for downsizing was, because I want to adopt it as well. Downsize myself, definitely go for it. Checking out everything. Okay,
yeah, exactly.
Now.
So once you are child free, then you have to downsize, or maybe you can rent out your extra rooms. And but again, I think it's a bit of a cultural issue in Cyprus that you feel that you have to own. Yes.
But they should.
It's a colonial inheritance that you. Yes.
But the issue of rental is very significant because we are now, in Cyprus is not such an issue because it's such a small place, but in the UK, for example, a lot of the affordable housing, which was starting in selling part of the asset to individuals as shares, percentage shares of the flat, it became a problem because the working population moves around so fast and so much, they couldn't actually manage the transition of selling that shares in order from London to go to Birmingham and from Birmingham to Manchester and move around. So work nowadays is really flexible. So the issue of decent rental and somehow kind of secure rental is fundamental.
And just to comment on the last point about the incentives to Mr. Pakomiou, I look forward to see if it's the incentives are going to be adopted, but it looks like very difficult because of the way they were set up. For example, in Larnaca, when we did a small study, we found out that there are only 7 plots in the whole of Larnaca. You can apply this incentive because it's only on residential zones, but it has to be on a main road because you have to go higher and you can only go higher in main roads. But most main roads are commercial zones.
So questions to the suggestions to the director, and they were going to improve. This is what they said.
No, but the issue that Vanayodis is making is that the profit the developer would make from the extra plot ratio, already the landowner is going to ask for it. So that's why I believe absolutely that is not going to work. But the other important point he's raising is that all this process of affordability needs to start from the bottom up. The responsibility needs to be given to the municipalities, and then if there is a way of incentivizing the user in some ways, or the small developer, or the cooperative. For example, what we don't have here is a group of people deciding to build a plot of flats. Somebody owns a place, we should be asking for investors from friends and relatives to come and invest in it so we can build it ourselves. We get a good architect and we do the building and then we benefit the profit. So that's what I really found extraordinary and very interesting, this kind of bottom-up approach where always in Cyprus, because of the lack of sophistication in our planning system, we start from the top up. We should start from the bottom up. So shall we stay a little bit on this issue of the kind of planning system, to go back a bit, also to some questions about the planning law. We were having a very long discussion, Mr. Stylianides the other day at the deck, trying to change regulations in order to stop people turning storerooms into bedrooms. And suddenly we looked at each other and we said, why should you do that?
Why not?
You know, why not? Why not if somebody wants a small bedroom, for an extra room, why should you stop him adopting that or enlarging the common spaces? As we said before, I mean, I like the point of actually outdoor space, which is very cheap. Elena made the point, is living space. So give a small living room and actually a very large veranda, which is very cheap, and it doesn't count into the plot ratio, and change the equation then, the affordability of the equation. So what do you think about the strictness of the planning system, which I think is getting stricter by the minute? In other words, it's about more and more regulation and guidelines and more guidelines. We're touching everything on everything in order to restrict what Wafaa was mentioning as the flexibility of the interference with the built environment. Any comments on that, Andrea?
Yeah, I think you spilled our secret, but it's okay.
Oh, sorry. I'm very sorry.
Yeah, I mean, once you realize that, you know, I think most architects are sort of guilty of designing a veranda that they think it might close at some point. But maybe we shouldn't feel guilty for designing it because it will enable a family that could afford only a one-bedroom house suddenly to have a few children and use that veranda as a bedroom. So I think the whole system essentially is trying to ensure that, or should be trying to ensure that there is fairness in development, that some development is not getting something extra in comparison to another development. But I think it has become maybe too strict or so strict that doesn't allow this flexibility for change, that maybe we see a little bit more in Cairo, maybe too much in Cairo, but maybe there is a middle ground somewhere.
Okay. Interesting. Another?
I would like to make a comment regarding the prefab construction.
Prefab construction, I was going to that.
Of good quality. Of good quality.
I agree, but our experience shows that the prefab construction is not cheaper unless you have to keep the typology. If you want to make a free design, in that way the prefab is maybe cost more. Maybe it will cost more.
Yeah. Anybody else having a view?
Everything has to be imported. I think Spain is going very good in that direction. I found out.
China.
Okay, China. And they have there's an architect in Spain, I don't recall his name, that he's having online to buy a house, 100 square meter, prefab. I mean, it's coming and it's just the rough foundation on the floor, and it's built in 15 days. This is affordable. Also, time is very important to have a proceeding area. And I am with you. I mean, there's something we all are interested to do, but unfortunately, Cyprus, everything has to be imported, and the regulations, to follow the regulations.
And the tax on that and so on, yeah.
Who is, if I recall, everything prefab, prefab or metal should license or on another level from municipalities. All time it was from ADI.
Yes, and the anti-seismic regulation, every time we try to use it, it's
I want to make a parenthesis, sorry, I mean, for Mr. Pacomin. And this is a statement as Maria, and the feeling I got when I saw the presentation. Sorry, forgot in Greek. Θεωρώ θα δουλέψει, αλλά δεν θα έχουμε μειχτά κτίρια με χαμηλά ενοίκια και χαμηλή τιμή αγοράς. Θα αγοράζουν την υποχρέωση οι developers αυτοί που θέλουν να το κάνουν και αυτά τα λεφτά θα μπαίνουν σε έναν ταμείο. Στο δικό σας το ταμείο ή στα αρχεία αυτών που είπετε. Θεωρώ ότι ο ΚΟΑ έχει αυτή την υποχρέωση τώρα να σπρώξει το κράτος, να χτίσει το κράτος, αλλά χωρίς την ταπέλα του social housing και να δημιουργήσει γκέτο, γιατί πάω πίσω στους προσφυγικούς συνοικισμούς, τότε ήταν γκέτο και εξακολουθούν να είναι. Και ήταν κρίμα να σποντούν το ΜΑΡ που έμπαινε, πάμε και στη Γαλλία και στους προσφυγικούς συνοικισμούς που είχε η Γαλλία και ήταν γκέτο. Αλλά να φτάσουμε μόνο σε τούτο θα δουλέψει. Εκτός αν είναι κάποιος ο οποίος είναι μερακλής και δεν τον πειράζει. Και θα δουλέψει πολλά στη Λέμεσο, λόγω της τιμής πώλησης των διαμερισμάτων που...
Ναι, βεβαίως, ναι.
Back in 2000, I did redevelopment regeneration in Hackney, in London, where we demolished the towers built in the 60s. And we developed there open market, shared ownership, and for rent. There we were the first in the country to introduce the so-called pepper potting. The pepper potting, yes. The pepper potting was to give the opportunity to those who they want to either share the house or the low-income people, as they were, to choose wherever they want to be able to mix the community. The success of any community, any affordable housing, is when you mix community together. If you separate the community, it's a big failure. Thank you.
Yes, in Cyprus, I find we're in such a good position in order to do that, because already our communities are mixed, our families are mixed. You find a single family the same. You don't know, you want to
Just
answer.
to add that in Cyprus we have a culture of individuality. Flexibility is connected to sharing spaces, to common spaces. Our flat buildings, our individual houses are lacking in shared space, in social space, in spaces of encounter that can relieve the lack of individual space when we go to smaller housing units. So it's a culture, but it's also a matter of regulations and the strictness of the planning system.
Absolutely. But I think compared to this,
I was thinking exactly the same as what Vionas just said, that there's a very small percentage of public social housing initiatives by the government in Cyprus. I don't know what it is. What's available now, single individual house ownership is also going down, so people cannot afford. So basically what's the availability that we have in the market is development, apartments. And I think that the typology of those apartments doesn't really correspond to the needs or the culture that we have. It's sort of like, it's been sort of like, you know, forced upon us, you know, the 1 and 2 bedroom and 3 bedroom apartments. And then I think it has to do with the policies as well, what guides this. I mean, we talked about adaptability, being able to adapt to the needs in time. When you have a 2 bedroom flat, it's not just counting the square meters of number of rooms, but the storage area and the flexibility of adapting through the needs of people and things within it, and not just counting the square meters and the bedrooms and the bathrooms and the handicapped bathroom and all those things that are policy guided. So I think what's available for people does not really represent their needs, either the young generation or, like, you know, the middle class. And also what's the issue of time. The issue of time and economics, I think it's a big aspect, from the permits, getting permits, to the construction, to the material availabilities that we have in Cyprus. Time is a huge cost on anyone. It's a huge commitment, and especially now the last few years with experience of like economic crisis up and down, people sort of like are very sort of cautious. And then there should be some sort of rent control also initiative, because if we're saying that people should rent, people are afraid. I mean, in Limassol, for example, I mean, the idea of actually not owning something and having to rent, it kicks you out of the city. So there's a fear of that. And Nicosia, from what I hear, has the lowest rents from all towns in Cyprus right now, but even those are not so like staying where they are. So it's due to a culture of having security of owning something, convincing someone that you can rent to have flexibility. I mean, that's an even scarier sort of like, you know.
You need to produce it before you can actually convince people that it's valuable. Lovely. I have one more issue that I really want to sort of close with. Eva mentioned or question climate change and does sustainability cost? Do you find in your work that you're working on the ground, you're designing continuously, does it actually indeed cost all the kind of new fuss about being proper and sustainable and so on? Wafaa.
Well, I will answer that, but I also want to answer about the smart, terminology of smart thing. Well, I don't have an answer, but definitely environment and economics and social may not necessarily work together. And it's a very difficult question to answer, because it depends on your priorities and what can you achieve. You cannot have them all. So depending on your own priority, you have to do some sacrifices, and trade-offs must be done. So the problem is, because I attended in Egypt, there was without saying any names, an international concrete manufacturer working in Egypt, and they were presenting their new development in Egypt, and they were saying our building is smart because we have PV, we have thermal heat, we have adaptable facades, we have I don't know what, and this is what has, you know, bothered me, because who said that this is sustainable and who said this is smart? So, answer to your question, I mean, the antonym of smart, I mean, this is stupid, you know, I mean, you cannot just, and there are people who buy this, and this is another thing, you know, how to educate the community for them to understand what is good and what is bad. And in our culture, and this is really bad, they get, I don't know, you know, I don't want to stigmatize anyone, but what they see in the richer countries, they try to, you know, repeat it because this is modern. I just have one comment that I want to add, that I couldn't afford to buy myself a housing unit. Yeah, so me with my sisters, we said, okay, let's all contribute and buy it. That was like 6 years ago. Now the cost of the unit is 6 times what we are paying for. So it's also an investment. So people want to own because they know that in a couple of years they can make double or triple or even 10 times the cost. So it's an investment thing, and people buy the units and close it because they know they're going to sell it to a larger scale. So it's not about only the architects. The architect cannot achieve affordability, and this is what my presentation was. It needs alone, yeah. So it needs to be the whole, you know, the whole system, the government, all stakeholders. There need to be some understanding. What do each one understand under these terminology? Otherwise, everyone is talking in a different direction.
Great.
Εύα. Η αναρχιδόμηση είναι το πρόβλημα της των πλημμύρων στη Θεσσαλία κλπ. Και είναι εδώ που λέω το κράτος τι κάνει. Τι κάνει το κράτος. Και θα καταλήξουμε εδώ στην Κύπρο. Τι κάνουμε το δικό σας για να προφυλάξει αυτά. Και τελειώνω εδώ.
Μάλιστα. So if you're all happy, I think, Andrea, do you have something, a concluding comment?
I can just comment on the environmental question. If the increased environmental requirements cost more, I think it depends on who you ask. If you ask the developer that is constructing to sell, then it costs more because he needs to construct with more insulation and apply PV panels and so on, so it costs more for him. But for the end user, over the life cycle of the project, it probably offsets this cost and is more sustainable at the end of the day because it reduces the electricity cost, the energy cost for cooling or heating the house, but then also there's other elements and factors within environmental design, like orientation, like considering greenery, considering the size of openings and specifications that also relate to the energy efficiency of the building. And when we start building knowledge, and this knowledge becomes available through seminars and workshops and universities to architects that learn to apply better design principles and materials, then I think maybe that cost is not that important.
Right, thank you, Andrea. A final comment from Άλκης, and we'll close.
So, just very, very brief 2 comments. I totally agree that the municipalities need to turn into a bottom-up system, looking at their needs, seeing what the communities need, and then go forward to the planning department and see, we need this, let's do this. So it's an opportunity now with the transformation of the local governance to be able to solidify this approach. And I think we need to push it as a Cyprus Architects Association, as the Technical Chamber of Cyprus, we definitely need to do that. The local governance will have the autonomy to do this, and we really need to push towards this direction. The question by Eva in terms of reuse and renovation, I think is very vital, is a very vital question. We have a building stock that is not being taken advantage of, and we need to look at this building stock as an opportunity, as Maria said, I'm not sure, as Wafaa said, that we need to look at this as an opportunity. It's an investment opportunity that keeps the character of a city. There are important modernist buildings that are very important, and we need to maintain and keep in the tissue of our cities. And these are opportunities that we need to take advantage. If you look at the new European Bauhaus policy, it's all towards that. Do not demolish, renovate instead. And this reduces the impact to the environment, reduces cost, it gives opportunities to investors, and the government needs to look at these policies as well in order for us not to start expanding outwards towards our cities, create pollution through commuting, create traffic jams that we already have, and traffic problem grows faster than we can resolve it. So let's take advantage of our unused building stock in order to be able to maintain the character of the cities as well.
Well, there is only a very kind of one.
Just a question.
Maria, play.
Do you consider Cyprus well developed, overdeveloped? I don't. We don't have a city center in Nicosia. We don't have a city center in Limassol. We are just doing that. We are not Europe. We're not Europe.
Yeah.
So I am with you, yes, for the renovation, but we have first to complete something, to have something in reference.
Have something in reference and kind of shape the city. Concluding, it sounds as if all of that, it's a puzzle, and one needs all the pieces of the puzzle in order to see the picture. I don't think one strategy or one component, either design or policy or development practice or anything, it's that everything needs to work together in order to be able to click and actually generate the picture. Guys, there are some drinks. To start with, I would like to really thank you for being here, particularly Wafaa for traveling for so far in order to see us. Thank you very much for being here and being such a kind of nice, great audience. Thanks a lot. There are drinks at the back. We will be here for a while so we can continue our conversation. Thanks.